Hey everyone, we're here for our webinar series as we're continuing exploring different topics about Workiz. Today, we're talking about 5 steps to master your QuickBooks. I see some people have joined. If you guys can say hello in the chat where you're from, just so I know that people all can hear me before we start, that would be great. All right, I see some people are typing. So that's a good sign. Beth and Dale were typing. Rob, I think I've seen you before at a webinar. Good morning, Maria. Hi, Beth. Thanks for joining today. Nevada, nice. Okay. Deanna, very cool. All right, well, let's get into it. Today we have an exciting speaker with us today. I'm Wes, your moderator at Workiz, and then I'm going to pass it to Alan to introduce himself.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. I don't know that I can promise exciting because we are going to be talking about accounting. So, buckle your seatbelts and stay on board. But yeah, my name is Alan Holmes. I'm the owner of InSource Books, advanced certified QuickBooks Pro Advisor, along with a lot of other stuff. I work with Workiz customers, helping make sure that your books stay up to date and that the integrations work, as well as with other companies, businesses, tech companies, and other bookkeeping firms resolving complex financial cleanups and implementing accounting information systems. So exciting stuff, all that.
I mean, money is always exciting, I think.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So I deal with money, and today we're going to talk about money.
There we go. All right, so today's agenda, we're going to do an overview of integrations. Then we're going to get into a little bit about the step-by-step guide about the Workiz integration. And then third, Alan is going to go do a demo for us. And then at the end, we'll open it up for Q&A. So if you have questions throughout the webinar today, I'll be watching that. I'll try to answer some of them in the chat if I can answer them in the chat, but we'll save most of the questions to the end. So I'm going to pass it off to Alan to get started.
All right, thanks. So first off, we got to cover some of the more technical aspects of it, just so we're all on the same page here, is why we should care about integrated systems and why that matters. Primarily, and again, as Wes said, this is all money, but you save time. You save time when you have different platforms that are working together, or if you have like an ERP platform where it can provide all your functionality in one thing, you're saving time from having to go from one to another and duplicate entries. You reduce risks. Every time that you have to type in a number, transpose a number, something like that, you run the risk of some error happening. When it's done automatically for you, it's so much faster, so much smoother. You can gain additional insights. Again, depending on how the APIs are drawn out between different platforms, you will have different information that will come in, and you can take more information over from one system to another system or back and forth, so that if you have, in today's example, Workiz and QuickBooks, we want to make sure that that information from Workiz is being displayed in QuickBooks rather than, I know some customers I've worked with from Workiz did not have their QuickBooks synced, and then they're just using the information comes from the bank statement. Hey, here's how much was deposited in my bank account. We're going to call that sales. Okay. But by having the customer sales integrated in there, we'll find out what the accounts receivable balances are. We'll be able to actually apply job costing, full-scale job costing, labor burdens, and all that stuff into QuickBooks using the information from Workiz. So we can definitely gain additional insights having that stuff. And then the fourth one, also, it's increased data efficiency. Ironically, that's kind of redundant from the other ones because, quite frankly, putting the data in multiple times in multiple locations, that takes up a lot of time. It takes up a lot of space. And as we know, time is money. Space is money. This is all costing us money, so we want to keep that integrated. So that's a real quick overview of why and what types of things should you be integrating. So a long time ago, when they invented accounting, you had to do accounting by journal entries, by journals, right? So you'd have a sales journal, you'd have a customer journal, you'd have all these different journals. And even though this has been hundreds of years that we've been doing double entry accounting, we still have to operate in that same system. Everything is kind of modular. We have our customer list, we have our sales list, we have our payroll lists and everything like that. It's just kind of put together a little bit better inside accounting software. So I wanted to make this point here specifically, that the things that we need to tie together are the journal entries that we would have together, such as sales and invoicing and payments. If you're receiving a payment, you would like to have that done either in the same system that you are sending the invoices out, because then it matches, or something that's going to be integrated. Job cost and inventory. You can get an inventory management system. If you don't sync that into QuickBooks, where you're not applying your overhead job costs and stuff, you're not going to get the full perspective. So these are essentially the things that you should be integrating in today's world. Is everything. Try to get everything as much as you can put together, because again, this is saving you time. This is giving you quantifiable data that you can use to grow your business. And what should you do before you click sync? And I have to put this one in here too, because think before you sync. This is a big issue, because we live in this modern world, and all those things that you already knew. Yes, we want to integrate. Yes, we want all this stuff to work together. We kind of go into things sometimes with a blind faith that everything's going to work out. If we just push the button, everything's going to work out. And I'm here to tell you that it does not. It does not work out. There's oversights. So before you do any kind of initial sync, or before you decide to set up an integrated platform or integrated system to run your business, make sure you really understand the flow of data. Make sure that you understand what's coming over, when it's coming over, and how it's coming over, what goes back, if it's two-way sync or one-way sync, or if you set up automated syncs through a third party like Zapier. Make sure you understand the triggers, make sure you understand the results. Develop an integration plan so that you have your entire system planned out. If you go in and you just sync into one system right away, you like, oh, I'm going to start a new business, and I start QuickBooks, and then I start Workiz, and I sync them together. Come to find out, well, maybe my business actually requires an inventory management system as well. How is that going to integrate with these other ones? So make sure that we get the full plan. And number 3, I would tell you, if you're already operating a QuickBooks file or any kind of SaaS file, if you can do a backup, do a backup. One of the benefits of having all the software on the cloud is that we think it's secure, right? It's in a data center somewhere. It's got a backup. So if the data center catches fire, or my server space crashes, it just flips over to a backup. And that's true. That's called RAID 1 backup systems. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't back up the changes that you make. It's a live backup. So if you make a change to the data, then it's going to make that change to the data in the other duplicate system as well, the duplicate server. And I tell you that because it is a cautionary tale. Just a few months ago, someone came over and had done the initial sync in Workiz. They've been using Workiz for a very long time, been using QuickBooks for a very long time, did the initial sync, over $4 million. It's 40,000 transactions and $4 million synced over. It overwrote the customers on the other side, and it was a tremendous cleanup trying to do all that stuff. QuickBooks, there are apps that can back up your QuickBooks. Even if you've done the initial sync, I still recommend, again, because I'm more partial to the accounting system, making sure that that's always accurate so that you always have your estimated taxes prepared, everything like that. There are softwares that will create backups, ongoing live backups for QuickBooks Online, so that if you do a sync and it totally screws up your QuickBooks, you can just reverse that back. If you're interested in that, I'll have a link on my website. I'll put a link on my website to a couple of them. So back up when you can, and then test the integration if necessary. And I always recommend this. I create new trial accounts of QuickBooks every day. Every single day, I create new trial accounts of QuickBooks, and I start testing things, and I start clicking what's going to happen. Because just because the developer, no offense, Workiz, tells me this is the way it is, doesn't necessarily mean that's exactly what's going to happen, because these guys are pushing out updates every week. It's not like we're getting, like, if anybody used desktop software like I did, we get a notification saying, hey, we've released a new update, and then it's our choice to do it. No, this is happening live. They're changing your stuff live. So test the integration before you do it. I will jump in at this point and share Workiz specifically does have in their help center what will be synced ongoing. They've just added a two-way sync for clients. It used to be that whatever you put in Workiz would go to QuickBooks. You make an adjustment in QuickBooks and it would not work. But now you can do some of that stuff. If you are not already synced with Workiz and you want to do it, they have a two-stage initial sync. You can find all this stuff in the help article, so I don't want to go too far into it, only to say that a lot of data is being transferred back and forth. Make sure that you understand this process. Make sure that your customer success rep or whoever you're working with, or me or whomever, understands what your needs are and that you've got your QuickBooks backed up if you're using it. All right. Easy peasy, Workiz. So they told me I had to come up with 5 steps. So I did. Here's my 5 steps in Workiz. Create the job, add job items, create the invoice, sync the invoice into QuickBooks, and collect the payment through Workiz. I want to make some distinctions here. You could also create the client if that's not already done. If it came from one of your phone rails or something, then it's already in there, but creating the job, adding the job items. If we go back to, let me jump back over here. You'll notice that on this syncable resource list from Workiz, you will not see jobs anywhere. Jobs do not sync. Only invoices sync. So if you don't create the invoice, if you just punch the stuff in there, it's not going to show up in QuickBooks. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the live demo in just a second. So creating the job, adding the job items, create the invoice, and then syncing the invoice. And the last one is collecting the payment. Payments, I'm going to jump back here again in Workiz. Payments go from Workiz. Oh, shoot. That's big. Payments go from Workiz to QuickBooks. There's no QuickBooks to Workiz as of yet. So you have to put your payments in Workiz. If you put them in both places, if you try to put a payment in QuickBooks and you try to put a payment in Workiz, then when it syncs over the payment from Workiz, you're going to have 2 payments recorded in QuickBooks, and it's not going to work. And I put here preferably by Workiz Pay. There's 2 primary reasons for doing that. Number one is that's the only way you're going to be able to collect tips. If your business collects tips or your techs collect tips, you have to use the Workiz Pay. And number 2, because they implemented an auto reconciliation feature, which I talked about in a previous webinar, and there's some resources on it. But essentially, it takes out all of the steps that you need to do to get those transactions in there. So that's going to be, let's see. Okay, so that's from Workiz. Those are the 5 steps. When that's done, I say a quick look at QuickBooks. This is what I would do when I'm testing the software. This is what I do when I close books at the end of the month, or I'm closing books at the end of the quarter or year, depending on whichever period that I'm closing the books. But this is not necessarily something that you would have to look at on a day-to-day basis. Every single time that you create an invoice, you don't have to go over and check everything. But these are the things that are actually affected in QuickBooks by the sales process. The accounts receivable, sales tax, inventory, bank feeds, bank reconciliations, and also sales. I didn't put sales on there, but that kind of goes without saying because that's what we're creating invoices. So these are things that we want to look at to make sure that they actually sync correctly. Okay, let's do a demo. And I hope everybody is crossing their fingers because you never know what's going to happen here and how I'm going to manage to mess this up. But I've been using Workiz for a little while, and there are some different things you can do. add new, if you want to add new to a job or to a client, if you're creating a new client, I will tell you right off the bat that one of the issues that we have is that I run into is the naming here, client name, because it requires a client name. For those of you who are dealing with customers directly, that's fine. Anybody who's dealing with commercial stuff, that tends to be a little bit of a problem. So just take that in consideration. The company name and the client name, this is still a required field. And the purpose of that was, as the software was developed, they wanted to make sure that everyone had contact. That's how they tracked everyone's contact information, a point of contact. But I've been into some Workiz files where you end up with just a ton of contacts because you're working on one company. So I'm going to show you a trick in a minute to work around that a little bit. But for our purpose here, we're going to create this. We're going to use an existing alligator job type. If you're using Workiz, you know is required. This is something also, just so you know, I'm trying to get them to move this over into classes so that we can see some class-based financial statements. And then we set up our job types in Workiz for services or whatever we're going to do, schedule, address, so on and so forth. That's pretty easy. Step one. Okay, now here's where you can be a little bit more creative with your job name. If you have a client here, alligator, and he's got 17 jobs, and I've merged all these together so we have different names essentially for the different jobs. But if you have one here, you can take out the name if you wanted to and say Crocs Inc., and that'll push over the sync over to QuickBooks into Crocs Inc. Inside the job names themselves, if we're going to be using Crocs Inc., here you can actually put the job name if you wanted to. So we're going to call it a garage clean out, something like that. And that should give us a job name. Sometimes it overwrites the client, which we can go back and we can change that again, but it will maintain right here the client name. Okay, so step number 2 is to add the items to your job. What are we going to do? We got a full load here. Is it taxable or not taxable? We're going to say it's not taxable here. Very simple, adds in. If it is taxable, if you are doing taxable goods, then we have to check that on the QuickBooks side as well. One other note, Workiz is not an inventory management system. I prefer not to use the inventory function in here because there's not a lot. QuickBooks itself is not an inventory management system. QuickBooks Online is not great at doing inventory. If you have inventory, if you're heavy involved in inventory, then again, at the end, I'm going to give you my website and stuff. Let's talk, and we'll give you a solution that's going to work for all these platforms together. But to keep things brief for today, and so that it doesn't mess up on me, I'm not going to use inventory. I'm just going to use a product or service that's a non-inventory part. No tax, 470. It's very simple. At this point, you know, it looks like we're good, right? And here's the thing. I'm gonna back up 1 second here. I'm gonna go over to the QuickBooks integration settings. When you do the initial setup, it will sync everything. Go into your QuickBooks settings and check these boxes and look and see what your settings are, because this is going to determine how things are being recorded. Automatically sync invoices once they're paid in full. You're going to want that probably. This one is the one that gives us some funky name information sometimes, and automatically sync all payments. If you're not doing this, then you run that. You can go back into what I was saying earlier, where you can put your data into QuickBooks and your data into Workiz and then not sync the payments. And that was created specifically to keep that double entry from happening. But it's so much easier. Let's do one point of entry. That's why we have the integrations. That's how this is all done. So we're going to have that. And we want to save changes. Now you'll notice that nowhere on this list right now does it say automatically sync invoices or automatically sync jobs. It doesn't happen. So if we go back to our job 47 and we look at the charges that are on there, at this point, nothing is in QuickBooks. So to get it to go to QuickBooks, there's two options. If you're doing things on an accrual basis, if you're dealing with like corporations and you send them a net 30 invoice, something like that, then you're going to want to manually go in and first create the invoice. The invoice has to be created from the job. Still, it's not in QuickBooks until you go in and you hit Sync to QuickBooks. This will send your open invoice from Workiz to QuickBooks so that you now have accounts receivable showing up on your balance sheet. If you don't do that, then if you're on a cash basis, if you're just talking about, like, for example, Rubbish Removers of Texas, I'm using as my junk call template. I go out there and I want to get paid immediately. I've got my phone, I got my app, my texts are out there swiping credit cards. In that case, as soon as that payment is received, the invoice and the payment are both going to be pushed over at the same time and therefore show up in QuickBooks. Right. The way we can tell if it's synced is because it says synced with your QuickBooks account, and you can view in QuickBooks. So you've refreshed the page and there it is. Create the invoice, sync the invoice, and then record the payments. Okay. In the event that we have, I'm going to go back to this job. I'm going to add another half load or onto that job. Well, it's already created this invoice, but it's not going to sync this invoice. Now I have new invoice options. So if you're going to have to add a new job would be the preferable thing to do. But in order to get this stuff over, I should have just done a new job, but it doesn't matter. In order to get this stuff over, if you want this invoice, which has now been created with these two items, to go over there, you have to go in and you have to record the payment in Workiz to get it to push over. So I want 790, and I'm going to say that came with cash. And I add action failed because I didn't type it in correctly. Add. Cash. There we go. All right. Once that has gone in there, if we go back to our QuickBooks integration, we can look at the history and we can see that that payment has been synced at the same time that the invoice had been synced. So it resynced that invoice at the time of the payment. In QuickBooks, we should be able to see that we have customers, we have open invoices, garage clean out, Crocs. That payment is not in there yet. Okay, this is one that I just did today. In QuickBooks, that payment has come in and has it been applied to, yes, it's applied to the correct invoice. So that's all good. When you get over to QuickBooks, if you're not using Workiz Pay, you have to go in and deposit the money. And the reason why is that we have accounts receivable. The workflow in QuickBooks is accounts receivable. When we send out an invoice, we receive payment on that invoice. It moves the money from accounts receivable to payments to deposit or undeposited funds, whatever your accountant has called it. And from there to move it into our checking account, we have to make a deposit, which is plus new bank deposit. We have to find the transaction or a series of transactions. If it was a bulk deposit, come up with that amount and plug it in. Once we've done all that, then you go into the banking feed. Whenever you're closing your books, you find the transaction when it clears your bank account and you match from the bank feed to that deposit. If you're using Workiz Pay, all that part is taken care of for you. It automatically makes the deposit, it automatically matches it to the bank, and it's done. So that's it. After that point, all we really have to do, where we go here, is taking a quick look at QuickBooks again. Looking at the balance sheet, that's going to show us the accounts receivable. You now see that my payments to deposit is 0 because I deposited that entire amount. It's now showing up as cash. Oops, thank you, Wes. It's now showing up as cash in the bank. So that's the process. I still have $350 outstanding. Once I receive that money, I'll put it, it will go into payments deposit and it will go to cash. But if you don't follow that specific workflow in Workiz, this will not work. If you try to match, if you try to download off the bank feed, I wanted to show a live Workiz payment and stuff, but I'm having trouble getting QuickBooks to read the integration from Stripe. It's just taking some time. So I can't show you that, but if you don't follow those specific steps in Workiz, create the job, add the items, create the invoice, sync the invoice, and record the payments, then it's not going to show up correctly in QuickBooks. It doesn't work the other way. All right. That is the overview. Was there anything I should talk about a little bit more detail, Wes?
No, I think that was pretty good.
I try to keep it simple because it is accounting and we don't want to put everyone to sleep. So let's look. Are there any questions that I can answer while I've got all these screens open and I can take a look at?
Marco just asked, can you explain the process for net 30 account again?
Yeah. Again, to get the accounts receivable to show up, and to be honest with you, this is something that I'm working with the development team, trying to get this to work for us. But if I go in, what's it called? Oh, did I change the name? Say, if I create the job in here again, new job, and I go in and I want to put in the items that they're going to have. We're going to try one with tax because I'm adventurous and we've got time to see what happens and see if we can break it. So this is all, again, I test this stuff all the time. I use my fake accounts to do this. At this point in time, we have an invoice outstanding for Bear Cave, Business Bear Cave LLC. But nothing's going to show up anywhere until we hit create invoice. Invoice created, great. But Workiz doesn't really track our accounts receivable for us. We don't have like reports that show accounts receivable. It has sales. There's certain ways to do it, but it takes a couple of processes. So the best way to see what is outstanding with somebody is to go back to that particular, see how it changed my customer name from A Alligator when I deleted it. And I put a job name in, but then we delete this again and we're back to where we want it to be. But on your client page, this is the best view, the best dashboard, I think, of what's outstanding for this particular client. But to see it on a large scale, not so great. Inside QuickBooks, there's nothing. Nothing shows up. So in order for us to get the additional accounts receivable that we are seeing here, or that was created today, we need to sync that invoice. So you have to manually sync the invoice every time if you want to keep track of your accounts receivable. That is the trick. Invoice. You can also if you're doing multiple invoices and you're creating a lot of invoices like that, you can also go in and you can run a full sync, which will hit all of your invoices that are outstanding and bring them over at the same time. Again, think before you sync, make sure that you understand what information is going to come over. If you've made changes on one system that you don't want to be displayed on another system, make sure that you understand what's going to happen if you're going to go with this full sync button or this run sync button. Okay, tax rates. Tax rates are fun because QuickBooks uses a location-based tax, so we can see in the sync history that it failed because the tax rate is not defined in QuickBooks. The location-based taxing in QuickBooks is not great all the time. But because let's say if I'm wanting to collect this 6.25%, but then QuickBooks is wanting to calculate, because it is literally the invoice that moves over, and I'm going to show you that in just a second here. But if QuickBooks calculates a different percentage, then we might have a problem. So I'm going to go back into Workiz. It's not going to want me to do that unless I set up a 6.25 tax rate. Let me see. Texas state tax. Now we have that. Let's try again, crossing our fingers with sync to QuickBooks. And this is why it's important. Honestly, this is why it's important to have all this implementation talk and do all this stuff, because we want to make sure that it's right. If you just jump in there both feet, you haven't made a plan, you haven't talked to the people, then you're going to end up with issues. Okay, here we can see that the invoice has been synced now. Our invoice 27, which has our taxable goods, has been synced because we've been able to tie into a point. Inside QuickBooks, you're going to see an actual invoice has been created. This is a QuickBooks invoice. So due in 14 days, which is the default that I have set up here. But it literally looks exactly like the new version of the QuickBooks invoices. If you haven't seen this one yet, it's a little bit cleaner right there. But it won't show up unless you receive the payment or you manually sync the invoice over. So it's a lot of processes to do that over and over again. Again, we're working on different options for those that are using accrual-based accounting. Primarily what I do for my customers that are using Workiz and using QuickBooks is I run the full sync. I make sure I understand at the end of the day, I make sure I have a backup of the QuickBooks file ongoing all the time. Then I run a full sync to make sure that all those invoices have been created. And in Workiz, it will tell you that when you have completed a job, it will tell you that you have, oh look, there's your past there. They've added this AR dashboard right here on the client's thing. How cool is that? Way to go. But it will tell you here that you have jobs that have been completed that need invoices. If you click on the invoices tab on the left column, that tells you that at this point, these jobs are not being pushed over to QuickBooks. So you're not getting reliable financial data there. So you can just click on that and you can find out which ones job status submitted and done hasn't been synced over to QuickBooks. So yeah, I would use a full sync. You must create the invoice before you do the sync, because the job does not sync from Workiz to desktop or Workiz to QuickBooks. Okay, so that was a very long explanation of the whole process again, Marco, but that's pretty much it. If you want to keep accounts receivable, you've got to do these manual processes to get that over right now. Let's see. Gene says, I just create the invoice in Workiz and then pay it. Is this correct? Yes, Gene. And that's essentially what Workiz was originally designed to do. So we're trying to broaden this stuff, broaden the base and the opportunities and the options that they have. But essentially that's what it was designed to do. You create the invoice in Workiz, you leave it in Workiz until it's paid. At that point, it's going to come over as paid. You're going to see it come from the bank account. And that's essentially cash-based accounting for your income. When the money hits your bank account is when you're going to report it. Check with your tax preparer or on your tax return if you're doing your own to make sure that that's the correct format to be used for the taxes, because changing your accounting methods is a rather arduous process with the IRS. But if you're using cash basis accounting, then that's totally fine. That's exactly what it's designed to do. Our options by Mark sent and sync to QuickBooks the same thing. Let's see. Oh, okay. So no, they're not. In this Mark sent and sync to QuickBooks, if you're using Workiz for all of your invoicing and all of your job scheduling, invoicing, tech stuff, when you do the invoice in here, it wants you to hit this little paper airplane to send the invoice, which will email the invoice to them, request a signature from your customer, let them pay by credit card if you're going to let them do that. Set all this stuff up, and you can set up the template somewhat in Workiz, but this is what shows Mark sent. However, I believe, so this is synced to QuickBooks and sent no. So it hasn't actually been sent to them. And that does you absolutely no good if you create an invoice and then don't send it to your customer, because then you're not going to get paid. Which reminds me, I've got to send a bill to Workiz too. But we'll do that after the call. The point is, those are two different processes here. No problem. If estimates sync over to QuickBooks after another job was performed, no, estimates are non-posting transactions in accounting, so they should not sync. The only thing that should sync, if you take that estimate and you convert it into an invoice after the job has been completed, then yes, that will sync over. But the estimate itself should not sync. That's just creating, It's like, did I get to the right one? Okay, let's find out. I want to make sure I understand the question completely there. No. The only thing that is syncing is the end result of the invoice, this particular invoice. We'll switch to the old layout if anybody's more familiar with the older layout of the QuickBooks invoice. Kind of looks like this. This is literally what comes over. So all of this integration with Workiz has the API built in for each of these fields, and that's what comes over and it creates the invoice. So the sales tax here is being calculated based off of location rather than the 6.25. So the sales tax is something that we need to fix on the QuickBooks end to make that work correctly. But all this stuff is just synced over and an invoice is created. So any of your estimate details are not going to be there until the point in time that you've created an invoice. If they show up in your descriptions from Workiz, then it will show up in your invoice here. So let me know if that answered. Yep, good. Okay. I think there was one more earlier. QuickBooks needs to add a paid in QuickBooks type. Okay, that's fair. Just like in here in the payment stuff. Yeah, that's fair. Honestly, I think they were actually working on a two-way sync for that as well. But for now, I mean, you can use any of them. Actually, you can change payment types. Can't you, Wes? Can't you set up additional payment types in the settings?
Yeah.
So you can customize that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know where.
Well,
but I've saw it before.
I sent your info, and we'll get that in front of our CS team for you.
Okay. Yeah. I know you could do it. I'm pretty sure I've seen it before in here. Not that. I'll do that. You can't do it, Gene? Well, then that's something I don't understand why we couldn't just add that in there. But again, I don't work for Workiz, so we'll Wes has got that over to the team. Put that in as a suggestion. I think that's a good suggestion. Like I said, it may be a moot point coming up when they create a two-way sync anyway. Yeah. Any other questions? I know this is all terribly exciting stuff. I think we got about 3 minutes left if there's anything else.
I know someone else is typing a question, but if you want to go ahead and well, there might be another question that pops up, but if you want to go ahead and kind of explain how people can get in touch with you afterwards and what you do. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and tell people.
Yeah, again, I do this kind of stuff for a living. I do accounting, and I do accounting information system implementations. I test the stuff. I work with it, make sure that it's working for you. The absolute worst situation is when I see a small business or mid-market business get into a new piece of software and find out that it's not giving them the financial information that they want. So if you're in that boat, or you want to talk to me or anything else, get a free consultation, insourcebooks.com. You'll see this lovely picture all over the place. You just click on any of my smiling faces and it'll sign you up for a consultation with me. And let's sit down and talk about your business. Let's talk about what you want to do, what you're doing with Workiz, what your entire system looks like, and how we can streamline that, increase your efficiency, save you some time, and hopefully increase your profitability.
Yeah, thanks for that, Alan. And we have 2 minutes left, but I first wanted to really say I appreciate your time here today, and I appreciate everyone's questions and for listening and participating. And so, yeah, I just wanted to thank you. I think we got another question in the chat if you want to take a look at it from y'all. So commission calculator to go over automatically to QuickBooks contractor pay. I'm not sure the answer. I can have, if you want to send me a note y'all after, I'll put my email in the chat and I can make sure we get you some help with that.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So reach out, either one of us, and let's find out what your pain points are and let's get them solved. That's what we're here for.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate everyone here. I'm going to go ahead and end the event since we are at time. I'll stick around for another minute or two in the chat to see if there's any final questions that come up that I can ask or that I can answer over chat. But you guys have my email. Feel free to reach out. That is Alan's website, insourcebooks.com. He's a Workiz expert, and he can help you with the QuickBooks stuff. And as he mentioned, other stuff as well. So
like it says, Alan at insourcebooks.com. That happens to be my email address too, right there. If you just want to shoot me an email, Alan at insourcebooks.com. That'll work. So
awesome. Cool. And if you guys also want to watch this back again, you can always use your registration link or your room link that you use to access this live event to rewatch it. So the recording will exist forever on your link there. But yeah, thank you again. And any parting words?
Thanks for sticking with it all. I know that's a lot of stuff, but